Hey guys, Paul Warburg, back here in Utah today. Look, I know I've filmed in this exact spot before, but this is a really beautiful spot. And it's the kind of place where you could just sit all day and take drone shots forever if you wanted to. But you know who can't take drone shots forever? Moscow. Yes, that was a terrible dad joke, and yes, it is way harder to figure out how to start one of these videos than you might think. But we really do need to talk about Ukrainian drone strikes against Moscow, because they are becoming a very big problem for Russia, and Putin in particular is very nervous about them continuing for the next year or so. Now, when Ukrainian drone strikes first started hitting Moscow quite a while ago, everybody was talking about this for a long time, because the significance of this was not lost on anybody. It revealed quite a few things. First, it revealed that Ukraine had a technological advantage over Russia. And second, it revealed that Ukraine was able to pierce behind Russian air defenses several hundred miles into Russian territory and strike the most sensitive Russian targets, including power supply stations, oil refineries, and a lot of critical infrastructure very close to the Kremlin. However, in recent days, a lot of people have sort of stopped talking about this for understandable reasons. Because as it turns out, the same types of holes in Russian defenses that allowed Ukrainian drones to strike Moscow also meant that there were wide open swaths of the Russian border available for Ukraine to exploit. And so Ukraine has sent ground troops into the Kursk region, and for obvious reasons, people have been sort of fixated on that. Now, that is all well and good, but in many cases, it has caused people to miss some very significant developments in Ukrainian drone strikes, which some have argued could be more significant to ultimately ending the war than even the Kursk offensive is. What has happened in recent days is that Ukraine has really ramped up its strikes on Russian defense production facilities, which is obviously hindering Russia's ability to produce more weapons of warfare, something that they already had deep problems with. But this is also scaring away Russian defense production workers from wanting to go to work, as it's becoming more and more apparent to them that, like Ukrainians have been experiencing throughout this entire war, if they go to work, they could become a casualty of war. Now, part of the significance of this is that in previous Ukrainian strikes on, for example, oil refineries and oil storage depots, those targets are high value from an economic standpoint, but there's a pretty low potential for actual Russian casualties because the oil industry does not have a large amount of workers in any given facility at any given time. Production facilities are a lot different. In Russian defense production facilities, there is a lot more manual human intervention required, particularly in facilities designed to produce more tanks and armored vehicles, which is what Russia is really struggling with. And because of this, this is bringing the war home to the Russians in a much more real way, which, compounding with a lot of the other things that I've been discussing on this channel, is making a lot of Russians realize that this is a real war and not just a special military operation. And that could potentially lead to increased pressures on Vladimir Putin over the long term. Now, the best way to know when something is a big deal in warfare and actually causing the results that you want is when your enemy complains about it. And when it comes to long-range strikes in Russia, the reason we know they are so significant is because right now, this is the thing that Vladimir Putin is complaining about the most. Throughout the past week or so, Putin has made a lot of fresh threats against the West, saying that if they conduct or give Ukraine the ability to conduct further long-range strikes into Russia with Western weapons, they will experience severe consequences. And this is a theme that we have seen from Putin throughout the war, where anytime the West is getting behind Ukraine in a way that will be meaningfully impactful on the war, Putin starts complaining and setting new red lines. And one could actually argue that the best thing the West could do is look for every red line that Putin sets, because he never gives the consequences for the red lines that he sets, and instead jump right over them, because we know when Putin sets a red line, he is scared of us doing that thing to him. So with that in mind, let's talk about a few of the reasons that Putin is so afraid of Ukrainian drone strikes and other categories of aerial strikes onto Russian territory. I've already given one reason, which is a good one, which is that these things bring the war home to Russia, and it makes the Russian people realize the actual consequences of their actions. But there's a couple reasons that might actually be more significant and why Putin is pushing so hard on this. There is a key difference between Russia and Ukraine that anybody can realize if they just look at the two nations on a map, which is their size. Russia is the largest country on the earth by a large margin, which comes with some advantages, but it also comes with some very big disadvantages, which is that when you have a lot of territory, you have a lot of territory that you have to defend. Ukraine, in comparison, has a much smaller front line, particularly when it comes to aerial weapons. And so what we have seen over the past couple years is that Ukraine has been able to mount very strong air defenses, while Russia's air defenses have been shown to have meaningful holes in tons of different areas. For example, Ukrainian drones have been able to get as far as the coast of the Arctic Ocean in the north of Russia, and they've also been able to get as far east as regions that are bordering Kazakhstan. So obviously Russia has a lot of holes in its ability to defend its country. Now, another fact to add to this is that Ukraine is not just conducting these strikes with one or two drones at a time, which could be reasonably seen as being able to sometimes penetrate even the best air defenses. But often cases, Ukraine is conducting these strikes with 150 or more drones at a time, which shows that Russian air defenses not only have gaps, but they have craters. Now, for obvious reasons, that is going to make Russians in general feel a lot more vulnerable. But it also has an effect that a lot of people aren't talking about, which is that every time a Ukrainian drone strike gets past Russian air defenses, it weakens the credibility of Russia's nuclear threats. And this might actually be what Putin cares about the most. Think about it this way. Russia is never going to be willing to conduct a nuclear strike if they are not reasonably sure that they have defenses that can protect their own people from retaliation. Period. I know Putin is a tyrant. I know he doesn't care about his people, but there are several layers of approval needed for a nuclear strike, and Putin is not the only person conducting this. During the time of the Soviet Union, we saw examples of this, where submarine officers received false orders to strike or glitches that caused them to receive orders to strike, and they didn't do so, because nuclear strikes, even in the most tyrannical of nations, have fail-safes. And nobody in Russia, below Vladimir Putin, is going to be willing to risk the lives of their families, their friends, the entire world, if Russia's nuclear defenses aren't even functioning correctly. Now, what's fascinating about this, too, is that Ukraine is running low on soldiers on the front line, and that is broadly known news. But what is not broadly known news is that Ukraine is nowhere even close to running low on drones. In fact, Ukraine recently reached an agreement to begin exporting some of their drones, which have become the most advanced in the world because of their experience in combat, to other nations. And so Ukraine can basically continue conducting drone strikes on Russia forever. And Ukraine has a couple of options with drone strikes that they have not yet executed on, but that if they did, would be catastrophic for Russia. For example, there are crude oil export facilities on the Black Sea well within range of Ukrainian drone strikes. Ukraine has already proven that they basically dominate the Black Sea and that they can hit anything they want in and around this area. And up to this point, they have chosen not to hit these crude oil export facilities for a variety of reasons, mostly because they want to continue getting Western support, and in part, Western support depends on some Russian oil being able to get out to the broader world economy so that the world can continue functioning. But Ukraine reserves the right and the ability to conduct strikes on these facilities, and they might do so if, for example, after the US presidential election, a result happens that is not favorable to them. So for all these reasons and more, we should probably all be paying a lot more attention to Ukrainian drone strikes. Russia in particular should be paying a lot more attention to them, and they definitely are. That's why they keep, again, threatening the West to not support these types of strikes any more than they already have. But again, though, when a tyrant tells you not to do something, why would you listen to them? Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. This channel is growing extremely quickly. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and check out the Icarus project for more videos from me. See you guys.